This week on Quadriga, opposition unity deal, new hope for Syria. The many groups fighting the Assad regime have agreed to work together to topple him and have now joined to form a coalition. At a congress in the city of Doha in Qatar, the groups have now selected a council, and they also chose moderate Sheikh Ahmed Moaz al-Khatib to lead it. Will the opposition's new unity change the face of Syria's civil war?
Hello to Quadriga. I'm Ali Aslan, and we're going to talk about the conflict in Syria today, and more specifically, if the formation of a unified opposition is the impetus needed to solve this long-standing crisis. And to talk about this issue, I'm joined by three experts who've been following the story very closely. Welcome to Habib Saleh, who is a journalist and member of the Syrian National Council. He fled to Germany after serving an 18-year jail sentence for criticizing the Syrian government. Kristen Hellberg was a correspondent in Syria from 2001 to 2008. She still reports about the Middle East and reports frequently from the region. And Tom Goeller was the Germany correspondent for the U.S. daily Washington Times and the Egyptian monthly Egypt Today. He now works as a journalist and political analyst of U.S. and Middle Eastern affairs. Thank you all for being here. Clearly a very exciting week, if you will, from the Syrian perspective. Habib Saleh, the UK Foreign Minister William Hague even went so far as to call this formation of the new unified opposition group a milestone in this conflict. Would you agree with him?
I would like first that the English Foreign Minister should represent the whole European Union, and I don't like that England has taken the initiative independently. I wish that he sorted out all the discussions, debates in European Union, how to develop the atmosphere and the situation and the reaction and the European plans towards Syria, because we are founders of United Nations, we are a member of the General Assembly, we are, etc., members in Arab League, and we have been under slaughter for 2 years. So everybody tell us, sometimes you are terrorists, somebody claim us to be to fight without any horizons and without any, let's say, aspects or any, etc. Some people ask us to be supported by Gulf area, so we are Muslim fundamentals. We do say that the Europeans are supporting us more, and they are quite close to our revolutionary, because they are getting the bet that we will once be democratic movements, and we will bring to Syria a new democratic, genuine change in Syria.
But again, just to be clear and to get this point, is it a milestone? How significant is this formation of the unified opposition group?
Look, we have made a lot of changes. When we called for non-fly zones, nobody responded. When we called for and requested and appealed for some kind of European intervention in the crisis, nobody reacted, no parties reacted. They just sent some financial aids and they welcomed us as asylum seekers here, and it was and they were in the spot between the Assad regime, where all the European ambassadors are still working in Damascus, and they just send the Syrian ambassador from European Union, but the embassies, Syrian Assad embassies, are still open and working. So we request that Europeans will intensify their efforts in order to push us from our side, get unified, and to bring this Islamist fundamental into isolation, and to push the liberal, modern powers, movements inside the revolution to show up and to go. So the more the Europeans will advance this movement and advance these views or, let's say, visions, the more that the let's say, secular, moderate, let's say, scientific, liberal, modern cadres in the revolution will raise up.
Also, an emotional appeal to the Europeans to step up to the plate and recognize the new unified Syrian opposition. Christian Hellberg, again, the Arab League, the Gulf Cooperation Council, everybody sort of hailed this new formation. But again, do you think, first and foremost, that this opposition group has the support from within Syria, from the Syrian people?
I would agree. I think it is a milestone, it is a breakthrough, because what was the problem of the Syrian National Council, which was the biggest exiled opposition group, was that they were made up mostly of people that haven't visited Syria for decades sometimes. So they had lost the connection with the ground. So this new national coalition, as it's called, and the name itself says it, National Coalition of Syrian revolutionary and opposition forces, is made up of people from inside Syria, 2/3 and 1/3 of the figures of the Syrian National Council. So this is very important. And if you see the reaction from inside Syria, for example, the local coordination groups, that they are the ones, hundreds of committees that organize the demonstrations, the underground clinics, they take care of the refugees inside the countries. They are the ones who risk their lives on a daily basis for their struggle of freedom. Their reaction was immediately that this is the first time that any coalition, that any opposition body represents the revolution in Syria. So I'm optimistic. There are very high expectations. We have to wait and see how they deliver on this. But especially if you look at the three figures leading this new national coalition, I'm quite optimistic that they at least made a big step in unifying the forces.
Tom Goeller, do you share Christian Hellberg's optimism?
I share the opinion that this is an important milestone for both internal and external. By external, I mean now the Syrian opposition does exactly what you, Mr. Saleh, have stressed. It boosts itself up and it puts pressure on the Western side. By the way, not only on Europe, that has been very vocal, in supporting any kind of opposition and in asking routinely Mr. Assad to step down, but those were just words. Actually, this is true for the entire West, because also under the first term of the American President Barack Obama, the Americans were very timid. They were always asking for exactly what you now did. First, the opposition has to unify, and before last Sunday, there were chaotic rebels. Nobody really knows whom they stand for. Don't they fight a proxy war for Iran, for Saudi Arabia? Who else not? We don't know. And therefore, the West always had an argument or a reason to say, we stay away from them. Now, you force, with this coalition formed, the opposition coalition formed, the West to come forward with actions.
Yeah.
And we will talk more about the U.S. position on this decision, Mr. Saleh. But there are some people, overall this move has been welcome, but there are also some people who say, how unified is this new front really? At the end of the day, they say, what happens once the ultimate goal of removing Assad has been achieved? What then happens to this unified front? Will they still stand united?
Let me decide that the whole unification is a transitional period. And the soonest we come to decisive defeat of Assad regime, we will start our new constitution to make multinational and multi-parties elections, democratic elections, and we have now our constitution for civil state, and for independent judiciary and other, etc. So by then, now we have almost in Syria around 300 civil courts have already been established in the liberalized territories. So we have our local governments in the liberalized areas. So we are building a local government, and we are going to make a national cabinet, And we also going to go ahead with reunification, and we will have more and more movements and members to join the unification. That's why we are working very, very hardly on 3 tracks: the unifications until vertically and at all levels. And we are building the civil regime, the civil administration in Syria now. And we build our hospitals and we build our own administration in Syria. This is 2. Number 3, we have the we are looking to bring the most familiar, clean, well-famed people to join this coalition in order to prevent and to build all obstacles against terrorism, against al-Qaeda, against fundamentals, and against any civil war. We are building our state to control everything and to start the new state, civil, democratic regime after the removal of Assad directly, and I do ensure on that.
And Christian Halbrook, but there are some people who are saying this coalition has nothing in common, In fact, they have diverse interests, yes. And the only thing that really unifies them is the desire to get rid of Assad.
Yes.
No, I mean, if you look at the different opposition forces and the revolutionaries on the ground, there is more in common than only the toppling of the regime. Everybody agrees that they want to have a democratic, a civil state that is guaranteeing the same rights for all minority groups. Nobody, even the Muslim Brotherhood, claims to set up an Islamic state. This is clear for all the opposition groups. This is important. But the very crucial next step is to unify the military forces. Now, we have a big success in unifying the opposition and the activists on the ground. The very important next step would be to unify the rebel groups, especially the ones that control the liberated areas in the north of Syria. They have been under rebel control for quite some months. And what you just mentioned is the setup of some kind of an alternative of the post-Assad era, but it is very chaotic until now. We have different kinds of courts, we have different kinds of local governments, local councils, we have even rebel groups fighting each other. Right. So this is very important now, in this area, in this northern area, to set up something that could be an example for the rest of Syria. So the rest of the Syrians would see that after Assad goes, we don't have chaos, we don't have radicals controlling Assad, we don't have people again oppressing people maybe who were not with the revolution from the very beginning. So this is important, and this is a big task for this new national coalition, to be able to unify the fighting forces now behind them, and then to convince the international community to really support all these forces, the military forces, the political ones, and the activists on the ground.
And Tom Goeller, Assad predictably perhaps called this unified front once again just a group of foreign-backed terrorists. But is he perhaps feeling this time the heat?
I would say that in some respects, Assad is right, that rebels are funded by other states and that rebels fight proxy wars for other states. And with all due respect to both of you, but you are mistaken when you say that the opposition coalition fights for the same goal, for democracy. This is simply not true. Unfortunately, it isn't, because we do have, especially in this northern zone, which you say it is liberated, I would say it is not. It is under no control at all, neither on governmental control nor under rebel control. It is Syria is a failed state, like Somalia, and in the north, it remains to be seen what will happen. But coming back to the formation of the opposition, explicitly, there are Shiites fighting against the Alawite and Sunnites in Syria, and of course they don't want democracy. Of course they want to transform Syria into another emirate with Sharia law. And this is, by the way, one of the obstacles all over that time since the rebellion started in March 2011. why the West is so hesitant, and I will say rightly so, and we should not just wipe away this argument of Assad that the rebels are funded by foreign states. Yes, they are. The question for the West, for the entire West, the Europeans, the Americans, the Australians as well, they also have a stake in there, is what do we do with this information? How will we react?
But let me just step in very quickly, because this is important. You are right that there are groups funded by outside powers. They are Islamists, and they are fighting their own war for some international Islamic goals.
Yes.
These are not Syrian groups, and this is important. I was talking about the Syrian groups. I was talking about the basis of the Free Syrian Army, who are deserters of the regular army. There are local activists that demonstrated peacefully, that turned up arms to protect their neighborhood, and now they are fighting with this more or less organized groups. This desperate war, this desperate revolution has attracted jihadists from different countries.
Yes.
This is foreign influence.
Yes, we know this from Iraq
so
and
let's keep this revolution Syrian, because the Syrians themselves, they're not interested in any kind of Islamic State, I'm telling you.
I would very requestedly and kindly comment on 2 points of these two gentle people. First of all, she requested eagerly, honestly, and in a pro-Syrian human rights, etc. She has been living in Syria. So when we have such a strong government with all military power spread all over the Syria, and they split all the villages, cities, etc., so we could never, for logistic reasons, we could never unify the opposition fighters. Because that's why, for logistic reasons, we made a conference, and we concluded that every area and every doctrine, every district should have its own quarters, and they should coordinate as much as possible, as far as possible. But they have their own freedom to estimate and to evaluate the developing situation according to the reaction of the regime. So when we will have one leadership for the whole opposition in Syria, we are fighters, and we don't have the telecommunications, we don't have the logistic apparatus, we don't have any tools, any instruments which are very urgently needed for unifications and to build up the telecommunications. So we left every area to be free and independent, to fight by herself and to decide what is the situation developing in the area according to Assad launching attacks. So they will be free here and there until the Assad will get weakened or get defeated. By then we will move to reunite the whole movement, military actions and leadership. Number 2, yes, I have just said outside that we are worried about 2 tracks, and we are fighting on 2 dimensions, 2 tracks. First of all, we want to put the fundamentals and those fanatics, Islamists, aside. That's why we made the unification, and we have more than 2, 3, 4 liberal people on the leadership, on the head of this unification. That is, it is a proof, and it symbolizes that we started to feel the risk that unless we bring the liberals and we bring those secular people into the leadership, we will have the risks to go the other side or the opposite side. So we are quite aware about that, and we will never create or let the situation develop to bring fundamental Islamic government to Syria. We will keep the whole movement, even to the right, even sometimes to the left. We have to direct it in a good way, so we will come to democrat revolution, democrat transference in Syria.
Tom Goeller, did you want to respond directly?
Yes, please, because what Mr. Saleh expresses, I would wish every word you are saying would come true. Right now we are not there because too many other nations and interests are involved. Let me jump on what might be a solution for the whole thing, because actually the Saudis support the Shiites fighting against the Sunnis. I'm sorry, the Saudis are supporting the Sunnis, and Iran is supporting the Shiites, and therefore we do have a kind of religious civil war, a proxy war fought in Syria by other nations. Who can stop that? It is actually there's an easy answer on it. It's the United States that is left as the only world-leading country that, by the way, can also bring back Russia on a rational level, because in the West very often Russia is blamed next to China to block any solution, which is not that easy as it is often portrayed in Western media, because Russia understands this conflict quite well, but Russia doesn't want Syria slip into the same quagmire, say, like Chechnya. So the Russians have themselves an immediate experience with jihadists. But it is actually the obligation, the duty of the so far tame Mr. Obama to bring the Russians back to the table and find a solution, and the solution will be to set those under pressure who actually fuel the conflict. And this is the Americans can put pressure on Saudi Arabia and Bahrain and Qatar, who are really involved in this conflict. And this is what Mr. Assad always is referring to, rightly. And the Russians have the approach to the Iranians. And there actually lies the solution. And then you can do, I guess, whatever you would like to, because there will be no obstacle anymore.
I would very kindly comment, if just for a minute, that
less than a minute.
Just in a minute, that the international coalitions and the Cold War, which the Syrian revolution has created in the territorial, in the region or internationally, was not genuinely a production of the revolution. We are fighters in the Syrian areas against the regime, and we don't care what, and it's not our mistake, and it's not our plans, what the outworld is doing. So we have to fight our battle, and we will never take care of what is Russia planning and what is Iran planning, and this is not our production. Even if it's not our mistake, it signifies that the international world is not complied to human rights, to conventions, international convention, to Security Council conventions, to Geneva conventions, and they are not quite interested to help Syrian revolution. They just are interested to fight each other and to plan how to bring Syria back into their pockets as it has been during Assad.
But the international community, of course, matters. And Tom Goeller thinks that the key to the solution lies in Washington. And many Western nations indeed have reacted differently to the announcement of this new unified Syrian opposition. Let's have a quick look.
At a meeting in Cairo, European Union and Arab League diplomats greeted the newly formed national coalition with cautious optimism. But as of Wednesday, France was still the only Western power to have thrown its full support behind the united opposition. Other countries remained wary of full formal recognition. Many EU leaders urged the coalition to broaden its scope.
I would like to propose that the group Friends of Syria will meet each other very soon, which means before the end of this year. And then we can agree in the international communities on the next steps, how we can support and how we can work together with the new Syrian opposition leadership.
That's the only way EU and Arab leaders say the opposition can provide a viable alternative to the Assad regime and stop the violence that's tearing Syria apart.
Well, Christian Hallberg, so far only the Gulf Cooperation Council and France have recognized this new coalition as the sole representative of the Syrian people. What do you make of this?
That's true. They're quite hesitant. I would say the Syrian opposition succeeded in unifying. Now it's the international community that has to unify on Syria. The lack for any coordinated international action in Syria has led to this fact that you just very correctly described, that every actor in the region and internationally just goes for its own interest inside Syria. This has led to this chaos. Everybody has its proxies inside, and this is the problem. And the problem is that the international community, mainly the United Nations, are paralyzed. They couldn't do anything about Syria. So now, let's see. The idea of this unified opposition would be that Russia, and maybe even Iran, which I'm very skeptical about, that they understand, okay, there is an alternative to the Assad regime, which is not frightening us, which is not Islamist. So let's see how can we work with this alternative. And then the idea is obviously, if we still think about a political solution that I'm not very convinced of, but let's see if there's a chance for this, the international community has to unite, which means bring Russia, especially Iran, China as well, gets along with it, into the same boat, and they have to pressure the Assad regime. This is, for me, more important. They have to make Assad understand that he has no alternative than stepping aside, because the only way for negotiations is a transfer of power. The opposition is very correctly not ready to discuss any future for Bashar al-Assad in the country. This is impossible after 40,000 deaths. So we have to find a way for this regime to accept that they have to transfer power to an opposition council. And this can only happen if the international community, unified, pressures on Bashar al-Assad to realize this.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more in this respect, because I would forget, by the way, about Iran or getting China involved in this whole conflict. All international envoys didn't have a chance. So this conflict is not for the United Nations. I mean, let's forget about this. But there are enough bilateral interests and. Actually, it is now in the American president's hands to make it possible that two parties can save their face. It's Russia foremost, to give the Russians an exit strategy to say goodbye to Mr. Assad, and also the Assad regime. Maybe that the Assad regime gets a chance to get into exile to Russia.
Which Bashar al-Assad just opposed again last week. He says he wants to die in Syria.
We really need to offer him something but a final destruction.
You cannot offer him something. You have to pressure him to an extent that there's no alternative. Right. Because offering something hasn't helped for 20 months. Yes.
However, where does the solution lie? It is that the two former superpowers, and the only one left, the United States and Russia, agree on how to handle this conflict. Then the weak and loud Europeans will follow. They will easily follow. And China will not oppose anything anymore, because if the rest of the world solves this problem, why should China care? But there is also one more point we should not forget about, and this is the Arab world. The West also should really get the Arabs into the boat and not again take the hot coals out of the fire for them, because it's most of all their problem, their conflict, their war, their proxy war, and the West needs to hold the Arabs also accountable for what they are doing there.
But excuse me, this is mainly the revolution of the Syrian people. Okay, let's not forget what the Syrians want. And I'm a little bit skeptical about one point, because if this looks like a US-dominated solution to whatever happens inside Syria, it will not have any legitimacy inside Syria by the Syrian people. The Syrians are very skeptical, and Habib Saleh will explain this to us. There is a lot of skepticism towards the US policy in the Middle East, very well-based, because look at the last decade and what they did in the Middle East. And this skepticism is very, very it grew because the Syrian people felt completely alone in their struggle for democracy and for freedom. So let's not have it look like an international, deal dominated by the US.
First of all, please.
It could be a problem for the Syrians.
Excuse me.
Yes, let the Syrian talk.
First of all, I think that there's nothing more left in Syria to offer to Assad through negotiations or to etc. Syria is destroyed. Genocide has taken place in Syria. So we have 4 million now homeless, and we have no even infrastructures. We have no even the basic elements for life in Syria. So why should give Assad any place in the transitional period? So he destroyed a country. He has been launching a very severe, let's say what black rule for family rule, 42 years. Syria is known to be the republic family of Assad. This is one point. So Assad has exited the game, and the game is over with Assad. This is one point.
He seems to think differently.
Yes,
definitely.
yes.
Two. He has reasons for that.
At least this is my opinion, my view as a Syrian opposition.
So for you, it's not a question if, but when he goes.
No, it is not a question to talk, to negotiate, to debate, to etc. The next point is that he connected himself with the most fundamental fanatic empire in the world, Iran. And you see that the coalition Iraq, Maliki in Iran, and Hezbollah all together are completely involved in the Syrian crisis. And we know the backgrounds. It's Islamic background. It's, let's say, a struggle between modernity, liberality of Europe, and the fundamentality and fanaticism of Iran. So we tell everybody now, and we have told it before, that Iran, instead of facing NATO or European Union in Gulf, they are facing them in Tartus, my hometown. They are building three missile bases to face NATO now. The Iranian missiles in Syria now are only 60 kilometers from Cyprus, the member of European Union. So Iran is coming closer and closer. Russia is making more free in the East Mediterranean. We have never seen any movements, any activities, any navy, any military for Europe and United States. So they are leaving the area forever, the oil area, the area which produced all kinds of fundamentalities in even terrorism in the Middle East. America is fleeing. European Union is fleeing. And if they are leaving the area for Iran, Hezbollah, new fundamental emirate of Iraq.
Tom Goeller seems to disagree.
Absolutely. There has to be said something against this, with all due respect. But actually, you arguing why Mr. Assad is still very strong, because he has strong allies, and I don't see an easy end. I understand many visions you have, but this is wishful thinking. We are talking about now, and until now, Mr. Assad can daily show that he has a strong support in Syria. So we are talking about a real toughened, heightened civil war, and there has to be a solution that can only be outside, not for inside, for which rebel group fights whom, but we, that is the international community, yes, we do have, we need to commit ourselves to get those foreign interests out of Syria, so that in more or less for yourself you can find a solution. But you argued all by yourself that Iran is stepping up with missiles and coming to missiles. I actually find, or would say, one solution could be one easy next step for NATO or for the Western community could be to guarantee a no-fly zone in northern Syria, where then the opposition council can really show or create their own local government and can show the alternative. But first, you cannot do this alone. You mentioned it. You don't have the facilities. Yes. Therefore, someone needs to guarantee that you can, in peace, execute a free part or a government in a free part of Syria, and then this might help to find an exit strategy. But as long as all the rebel groups are fighting against the Assad regime and fighting themselves, there won't be a solution.
Christian Hellberg, objectively, on paper, even after the formation of this new unified coalition, Assad is still in power. The US is still hesitant to go in.
Yes.
Russia is still opposed to any external outside influence. What has really changed?
I mean, this has been a couple of days that we've seen the national coalition. We have to see whether out of this national coalition there's some turning point developing. This is still to see. There are a lot of high expectations on this. I'm positive by the people who lead this, but these people, especially the new president, al-khatib, he has little political experience. He needs people next to him who will lead this new phase, who will guarantee that the people inside Syria stay with him. And it's very important to make the people, the revolutionaries on the ground, feel a difference. Now, if this, for 2 weeks now, nothing changes, fighting goes on, rebel groups fight each other, bombing, they say, okay, nice, but what has changed? So this is how the whole failure of the Syrian National Council started. So there has to be some tangible outcome, and this needs the help, obviously, of the international community. I agree with what you said. My only point is, let's not have it look like a Washington-dominated solution. I think the US learned from their experiences in Afghanistan and in Iraq, where they installed a Karzai and a Chalabi at the very beginning.
Yes.
They do not want to do this in Syria because they understand we cannot send some exiled Syrian who has lived for 2 decades in Washington to be the new president of Syria. This is not possible. They have learned from this experience. They have learned that they don't want to go inside with their own military very quickly. This is good. Yes. But Hillary Clinton, for example, she was too outspoken in this whole Doha meeting. She really pressured the opposition. She said, okay, if you don't do this, we will not do this. I'm just saying that they should a little bit more moderate and careful in their words, to still have the Syrians decide on this, because they are very skeptical people, the Syrians. After all these experiences in the region, they want to create their Syria. Right. They want to be the leaders in this whole process. So they need the help, they need the support, but they don't want to be dominated.
The international community, I think, has no interest at all to solve this internal Syrian problem. It is just about how to help to prevent more casualties, more refugees. They are actually knocking at the European doors. I mean, Turkey is almost a European member, or a member of the European Union. It is a NATO member, so the Western world has an immediate border to this problem, and it simply cannot go on saying it's not our problem and you solve it first and therefore. And for my taste, and not only for my taste, the Americans hesitated way too long to do anything but vocal support. So I know about this problem. Either the Americans solve the problem, then they step in with their army and solve it once, but not for all. Or they do nothing. Whatever they do or don't do, they will be blamed. And therefore, I say, why not take the blame for now doing an initiative, get Russia into the boat, and Russia helps to pressure Iran, keep out, create this no-fly zone, give the Syrians, the Syrian opposition a chance to show what they can, and there actually lies the involvement of Washington, and it has to be done there because no other government is willing to do that.
I'd agree with this plan, but I don't see that there will be any direct military involvement by whatsoever Western state.
It is not necessary.
The plan that has been now cooked in Turkey was especially to just put Patriot rockets at the border.
But that would help for the no-fly zone.
Yeah, exactly. So this is an indirect way to impose it. Just threaten the Syrian Air Force to not come closer to the border, to protect 60 kilometers maybe inside the north, between Aleppo and the Turkish border, to have this zone 60 kilometers, to make it a safe haven for the refugees, first of all, and to make it an experimental ground for the opposition to develop its post-Assad era.
And unfortunately, since we're slowly running out of time, let's take a quick look ahead, Mr. Saleh. What's next? What are the next steps? What's going to happen?
I will tell
Syria?
You that that the revolution is going on. The more we have support, American support, European support, and we don't like more to talk about that Qatari and Saudi support. The more support, the genuine support, the liberal support, the diplomat, the political, the economic support that we ask is Europeans. So we want ourselves to be connected through the Mediterranean with Europe. We want ourselves to liberal. We want ourselves, so that's why I want to pass a very strong message that we are besieged and controlled by two fundamentalities. The Sunnah fundamentality, which is now suffering a lot because of the killing by Iran, by Shiite, by Alawites, and the Iranians who still have the empire ambitions to have Syria as a new member of the Iranian empire, as they succeeded in Lebanon to do through Hezbollah and succeeded in Iraq even after the Turkish, the American occupation. That's why I forward a very strong message that unless they get involved, they genuinely in the conflict, then
unfortunately, we have run out of time. I'm sorry, we have run out of time. I want to thank my guests for a very spirited discussion. I'm sorry, we've run out of time, Mr. Saleh. Thank you for tuning in this time. Clearly, much more to talk about in the coming weeks. Thanks for tuning in. See you next week.